Hi, Brooke. So let's talk about marketability. Why are family histories seldom marketable? The kind of stories that my clients write are not marketable really unless they intend to go beyond what they've done for family and friends.
I think the reason the publishing industry thinks that these kinds of stories are sometimes not marketable is partly because it's a saturated genre. There are a lot of people writing these stories, and so the few that stand out are amazingly well written or maybe are tied to an author who already has some degree of name recognition.
Right.
So that's part of it. I also think that a lot of memoirists, they're not, there are so many stories that are similar. And it's not to say that they're not important or necessary or even helpful. But from what a memoirist really needs to aim to do then is to pull out the issues and threads and topics from their memoir and ask themselves, like, how can I engage a broader readership in these questions and ideas and topics? And a lot of memoirists just don't know how to do that.
Right.
And so there's not always a direct line from someone like, I have a desire to write my memoir and I know how to market it. Quite often that line doesn't exist.
Right.
So it can be difficult for memoirists to get out there, and then you'll hear from the publishing industry that certain things aren't marketable, like grief. And yet most memoirs deal with grief. So it's a complicated question, and it's one of the reasons that at She Writes Press, we don't base our acquisitions on whether or not the concept is marketable. So if someone often will come to us and say, I went out into the publishing world and I tried to get this published, but they told me grief doesn't sell or abuse doesn't sell or whatever, you name it, right? Yet those are the stories that, frankly, people are wanting to write, and there might be a readership for it. It's just not always going to be in the thousands and thousands, which is what publishers need to sell to justify publishing a book.
Talking about marketability, what does it take to write a memoir that is marketable? One that's going to sell in the thousands?
Well, the publishing industry thinks that that's about an author platform. It's about having a pre-existing base or audience for your book. And, to use just a counterpoint of She Writes, we are not expecting our authors or needing our authors to sell in the thousands and thousands. Many of them have sold thousands, but some of them are selling, 700, 800, 900 copies. And still, that's a lot of copies, considering that a lot of self-published books sell between 50 and 100. So sometimes we need to readjust the numbers here a little bit to talk about what actually constitutes good sales.
Right.
But where the publishing industry is concerned, like if people really want to get a traditional deal with their memoir, they do need to have a built-in audience.
Of course.
That's and the writing is important.
Well, I was going to say, what about the quality of the writing?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like if you don't have that good platform, the writing doesn't even matter. So the writing is really important, of course. And a publisher may look at someone who has an amazing platform and built-in readership, but if the writing was horrible, they would probably suggest hiring a ghostwriter. They might even pay for it if the person were well-known enough. So for people who are really invested in craft and who are writing beautiful stories, there are some smaller literary publishers out there that might be only interested in the craft of writing. But again, like I was saying, it's just a competitive market, and there are a lot of brilliant writers out in the world these days.
Which is wonderful. So finally, you started to talk about distribution. What is an advantage in distribution of publishing with She Writes Press? And as a self-publisher, most people are going through, as you have said, Ingram, Amazon platforms, but distribution is a little bit more than just fulfillment.
Correct, yeah.
So can you be specific about the distribution methods that you use?
Yeah, and it's confusing for people because Ingram Spark and CreateSpace, which are two self-publishing platforms, use the words extended distribution.
Right.
So you opt into extended distribution, but you're right in that it is fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
And so they really should be using the word extended
fulfillment. Right.
So distribution means that you have some sort of sales force that is pre-selling books into the marketplace, taking meetings with independent bookstore owners, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and pitching books 6 months prior to publication. And then those accounts are taking orders. And then once the book is available for sale, those orders are fulfilled and your book is easily and readily available to any bookstore or retail outlet that wants to buy it.
So are you using Baker and Taylor and some of the other fulfillment or the catalogs, or just in your case Ingram?
Well, in our case, what we have with Ingram is Ingram Publisher Services, which is a division of Ingram that offers whole fulfillment and distribution.
I see.
So we do use Baker and Taylor and Ingram Wholesale, but those are third-party fulfillment companies again. And so the distribution options to self-publishers are very limited these days.
Right.
And it's one of the things that sets us apart because we have a distribution mechanism that is like a traditional publisher's. Thank you for making the space available for writers to do what they're doing. And I love this. I think people need to enter in at what point they're ready and then decide if it's for family or beyond. And sometimes I think that there are stepping stones to publication or broader commercial appeal. And sometimes people have more than 1 or 2 or 3 memoirs or stories in them. So I love what you're doing, and I love the synergy of what we're doing.
I do too. And thank you. Thanks so much for spending time.
Thank you, Leslie.